I'm Jesse Andrushko, and this is APTN News InFocus. On this episode, the Assembly of First Nations Annual General Assembly in Winnipeg.
First Nations are at a critical time in your nation-to-nation relationship with Canada. It is important to note that this week's Assembly is the first time that Chiefs will formally gather to discuss resolutions on the Build Canada Act, since it was rushed through Parliament in June. We look forward to hearing your discussions, your debate on the policy resolutions brought forward by many Chiefs, and we thank you for submitting your resolutions. The way the Act was introduced has caused concern for many Chiefs. This Assembly is an opportunity for Chiefs to deliberate and to provide direction moving forward. Important decisions will be made by the Cabinet under this legislation. We know that. Those decisions must respect your rights, your treaty and inherent rights, and your title, and free, prior, and informed consent. Despite the promises made by the new government, Chiefs wonder if the Crown First Nations relationship, is moving backwards in this new age of U.S. colonialism. So until an appropriate process is established with First Nations rights holders, founded in free, prior, and informed consent, the Crown's legal obligation cannot be met.
That was Cindy Woodhouse Nepinak, the National Chief of the Assembly of First Nations. It's an organization that lobbies on behalf of more than 600 First Nations across the country. Her opening address to the gathering was mostly about the One Canadian Economy Act. It's the federal law that will allow the government to push through projects it feels are in the national interest. This is the first time Chiefs have met since their summit with Prime Minister Mark Arcand in July to talk about the law. Has anything changed? That's where we'll start. APTN News Ottawa correspondent Karyn Pugliese covered the gathering and joins me now.
Hey, thank you for having me here.
Thanks for joining me. So to start, are Chiefs any clearer on what to do with the One Canadian Economy Act than they were in July with the Prime Minister?
I don't think they are. I mean, one of the things that happened is really at this AGA, the thing was like, does the AFN have any mandate here? Back in June, which was referenced there by the National Chief, the law was passed in 2 weeks. It was passed so fast that only the National Chief got to testify before committee on, how First Nations felt about the bill. She did it without a mandate because there was no time to get Chiefs together to give her that mandate. And, if she hadn't spoken, it would have been irresponsible for her not to. And so now what they were looking for at the AFN, they had a couple of resolutions on the table there, just trying to figure out what the AFN's role in this should be. Yeah,
so what is the problem as Chiefs see it? Is it something about the way the legislation is written?
Partially. I mean, first of all, it was how it was passed. It was passed without any input from them. Back before the legislation came into being, Mark Arcand, the new Prime Minister, famously sent out a one-pager to a bunch of Chiefs. Not all the Chiefs, just some Chiefs, and we don't know how he picked them. But he said, here, take a look at this and get back to me in a week with your thoughts. And this is just so far from where the consultation was with the former Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau. Oh my gosh, he's only been gone a little while, but it's like I've already forgotten him in this new era of Mark Arcand. Yeah, so this was hadn't been seen in decades kind of way of relating. So then, when they did see the text of the bill, there were a lot of problems with it. I mean, first of all, they didn't get a chance to really do a full legal analysis like Chiefs like to. Take a look at this, go over it with the lawyers. What does it mean? They ended up doing that after the fact, after it passed, and they found it lacking. You could go on and on about the problems with the bill, but the key thing is there are probably 4 or 5 points that the Chiefs like to see in every bill that really guarantees rights, really protects treaty rights and Indigenous rights. And also, just the ball has moved forward. They want to see free, prior, and informed consent in bills now. They want to see the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples incorporated into bills now. And those things were missing along with the usual protections. So for all those reasons, they were very upset.
So 2 resolutions were tabled dealing with the law. What were they asking of chiefs?
Yeah, so these were a little strange, and they both get voted down. Spoiler alert! But not because chiefs were feeling any better or worse about the One Canadian Economy Act. It was because they found that they were contradictory. So one of the bills said, and something that National Chief Cindy Woodhouse Nepinak has been pushing is infrastructure projects. Like, she wants Canada to resolve housing and schools and water and buildings and roads on reserve. And so early on, she had gone to the Prime Minister and said, well, could these kind of projects be the kind of national projects that you're pushing for in the One Canadian Economy Act? And he said no, which frankly to me makes a little bit of sense, because the whole idea of the One Canadian Economy Act is to counter what's happening in the US with Donald Trump, right? Donald Trump is threatening Canada's economy with tariffs. And so the idea is to get away from trade with the US, develop energy projects and other exportables that you can develop trade relationships with China. So I kind of get that housing and roads aren't those types of projects, although they may be necessary for First Nations to participate. So the first resolution contemplated going back to Carney and saying, well, these kind of projects should be included, and we want you to think about including them in the One Canadian Economy Act as national projects. And so the chief said, well, you know what? 2 things about this. One, it's contradictory. We can't be against the bill and then going and asking for the bill to do things for us. We either have to be in or we have to be out. And the second point that they made was that they felt that the AFN was now getting to a position where they were dealing with the government on land rights, and that really has to belong with the rights holders. So the chiefs and the people of the community have to negotiate that nation to nation. So that was the first resolution. And then the second resolution was the urging the federal government to just pause the act and then go back and, maybe revisit it, maybe address free, prior, informed consent, and to let First Nations shape the policies. And again, people said, you know what? Same 2 reasons. It's contradictory. We can't be half in and half out here. We either have to be for it or against it. We said we're against it, so we can't start doing things now that look like we'll endorse it maybe if you do something.
So you said both resolutions were voted down.
Mm-hmm.
What's next? Like, where does that any sense of like?
Well, that's the problem. It kind of leaves you a little bit nowhere. So, the chiefs that were getting up to the mic were quite vocal, and they were the chiefs who were quite antagonistic towards Bill C-5 or the One Canadian Economy Act. But you imagine that there's some chiefs that weren't getting up. We keep hearing that there's some chiefs who are contemplating projects. They're excited about projects. And, of course, the chiefs will all say they're not against development. It's just that it has to happen in a certain way. So it's left the AFN with basically no mandate to deal with this new law. It means that the chiefs are going to deal with it, I guess, on an individual basis. Or at least they may have to revisit and try to find some kind of mandate to give the AFN that makes more sense. So there will be a special Chiefs Assembly coming up in December. So maybe we'll see a resolution, a better thought out resolution on the table then.
Interesting. Well, the One Canadian Economy Act wasn't the only issue.
We have 4 months in which to get an agreement together, December 20th. And I want to assure you that the work we've been doing over the course of the last less than a year, 9 months, the work we've been doing once a week is done from our hearts because we are committed. No one's getting paid. All of our technical team, all of our legal team, everyone is coming to the table, and we have $0 from AFN and $0 from Canada to do this work. Yet we continue to advocate and push forward, and we will continue to do that. It's difficult, sure. It's difficult to commit to do this difficult work without fiscal capacity. But I can assure you that our team, the team from across the country and the regions have committed to follow this through.
That was Chief Pauline Frost. She's the AFN's regional chief in the Northwest Territories, but she's also chair of the National Children's Chiefs Commission. It's the organization that's representing communities from across the country at the negotiating table with the federal government. The commission's mandate is to negotiate reforms to the First Nations child welfare system. Karyn, remind us what the commission is. Who sits on it?
Right. So it is 11 elected officials to represent provinces and territories across the country. And it's mostly regional chiefs and politicians who are sitting on it.
So what has it been doing since it's been formed?
Yeah, well, I mean, like this was the first real kind of update that we've had on it. So just as a reminder, it's a fledgling organization. It was formed, voted into existence in December 2024. And the idea, as you said, was that it was supposed to finally negotiate some kind of deal to deal with discrimination in the child welfare system, which has been going on now for, they've been trying to negotiate a deal since 2016. So we're coming up on 10 years here since the original decision by the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal that said that discrimination in the system had to be dealt with. There was a $47.8 billion agreement that was put on the table last year that had been negotiated with the federal government. Chiefs voted on it, and the majority of chiefs rejected it, except for in Ontario. In Ontario, they decided that they were going to go ahead and negotiate a separate deal, and that left the rest of the chiefs and people in every other province out. So they formed this commission in order to negotiate a deal, and the government has just been refusing to deal with them.
So initially, when it was formed back in 2024, it had no money attached.
It had no money attached, no, because the government, as I understand it, is paying both sides of the negotiation for the Ontario chiefs, and had put some money into supporting negotiations. So, I mean, it's not, you have technicians and the commission who are working, just extra time based on the salaries that they already have and taking on an extra job, but you've got to get lawyers involved and ultimately other people who do have to be paid. So we were told that they've been meeting every week, sometimes 2 or 3 times a week since December. I suppose to discuss strategy and to negotiate. And then finally, just last month, the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal took a look at what has been going on and has ordered the government to sit down at the table with them.
Tell me about the resolution that passed.
Yeah, so this was a huge surprise. So they were going to pass a resolution, and the resolution was really just to accept the terms of reference and sort of get behind the Chiefs Committee. And give them a mandate to go and negotiate and, compel them to come back and do some consultations with rights holders, right? So that they're not just madly going off and negotiating things. So that's the purpose of the resolution. And then, Cindy Blackstock of the Child and Family Caring Society was talking about how they'd been working with no money and had no mandate. And she was joking about even having bake sales to raise money. And so the chiefs got up and made an amendment to the bill saying that the AFN should give the Chiefs Commission $1 million, which will get them started. It's estimated that it's probably more like $8 million that they're going to need to do the negotiations. And then that caused this huge kerfuffle because they're always at the side looking at every one of these resolutions. Always over on the side. There's a side table where there's professionals who look over the resolutions and make sure that they're legal and they make sense and everything so that somebody doesn't propose something that's just kind of impossible. And so they were flagging that the AFN could not give this money. And they got up and they explained that the AFN gets its money, and this is true, mostly from the government and mostly for specific deliverables. So the government will give them money and say, well, you have to hold 4 meetings on health. And that's where their mandate is to spend the money. they don't necessarily have a lot of wiggle room. So everybody went over to the side who was involved in this amendment and who was involved in proposing the resolution. And they came out with some very specific language that kind of says the AFN will spend the money according to its rules and of course according to, and so they put the $1 million back in with just some language, I guess, that kind of mitigates or tries to understand that they can't just pull it out of anywhere. So I'm still kind of curious about whether or not the AFN is going to be able to fulfill handing over that money. That's something that I really want to follow up on.
Interesting. I mean, do you have a sense of like when we'll kind of see something with that unfold, or like when will we see an answer for that, I guess?
Well, the interesting thing as well, the resolution was being passed. None of the regional chiefs and the national chief were in the room. So I don't know when they found out about this. I did see the national chief earlier today, but I actually didn't ask her about it because I thought, I'm just going to give the AFN a minute because they're going to have to. She probably found out about it, late last night or this morning, and, probably hasn't had a chance to even talk to her, the staff and at the AFN about how and if this is possible. And then, of course, there's still a shortfall. I mean, they still need another $6 million, it looks like, to be able to go through with this. So they'll be looking probably to the government to supply that money. It's a really weird system that we have set up where, you're dependent on the government to be able to move forward on your lawsuits.
I have a son who's 35. He was a full-fledged crystal meth addict. He is still currently on a sentence of probation till this December, in and out of jail for the past 6 years because of his addiction. He's like, Tribal Chief, Dad, can I have some money? For what? Well, I'm gonna go eat. What does he do? Instead of going to eat, goes and buys drugs. Cut him off. What did he do? Stealing, robbing, to feed his habit. Ended up in jail. Through our program, we ask people to make a choice when they're willing to. Employment or education, we can help them. He wanted to go to school. He said, Dad, I want to do what you do. I want to help people. I want to make a difference. I want to give back. I'm tired of hurting people through addictions. This past year, he had the honor of graduating from SIT, still on a criminal sentence for mental health and addictions. He crossed the stage and he received a diploma.
That was Mark Arcand, head of the Saskatoon Tribal Council. Karyn, the opioid crisis is something that has touched so many lives. What did the AFN do at the gathering to try and change things?
Yeah, well, let me just start out by saying I'm from Pikwakanagan, and we declared a state of emergency 2 years ago to deal with an opioid crisis. So, I mean, they started out this piece by saying, everybody's life has been touched by this. Everybody knows someone, and that's certainly true. And we were listening to Tribal Council Chief Mark Arcand there talking about his son. It was really moving. So, this is something that, I think that I just want to champion and cover going forward more in the year, because I feel like it's just, we're dealing with this stuff every day, and it just completely dropped out of the news cycle. So what they're trying to do at the AFN is, partially just get it back, into the mandate, trying to say, they had resolutions on the table, which I understand passed, where they're looking to appeal to government for more money, more funding. I have lost track of how many First Nations are actually under a state of emergency because of an opioid crisis. But I know, I think I was just Googling to try to add them up, and I think there were 14 just last year. And that just adds on to a number that have been going on. The part of the point of what they were talking about here was a little bit of information sharing, because they do have things that are working. They were talking about buying houses where people could recover and, just different treatments back to the land programs and things where they're seeing success. But the problem is so overwhelming that it just seems that no matter what they do, it's a little bit like whack-a-mole. Like, addictions are popping up faster than they can treat them.
Yeah, exactly. What did you learn from listening to people like Arcand?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just partially a reminder of just how bad it's gotten. Like a lot of times when you walk into communities, you don't even know because people might be using their home. Like on my community, it looks very quiet, looks very well run. The other thing is dealing with the family members. Again, something that came up at a band council meeting, in my community when they were dealing with the crisis, was something that they just absolutely talked about here was that what do you do when it's your own members who are selling the drugs? What do you do when somebody's using drugs and maybe becoming violent, maybe acting out? And, you'll have people say, let's get those dealers out of here. And then somebody's like, that's my mom you're talking about. And, it makes it so hard. And one of the things that they really turn towards is they really turn towards policing, which has been an issue that the AFN has been looking at in terms of getting First Nations police forces and community policing into communities. Because we all know there's some communities that rely on the RCMP, and the RCMP may not even have an office like nearby the reserve. So if something happens, I mean, you can be waiting hours for somebody to show up and help. Sometimes it's provincial police forces, but mostly discussion up to this point had focused more on dealing with racism in outside police forces. And now it's really being looked at as a solution to helping with the drug crisis, to have people who are connected to the community, who know the community, who care about people in the community, and who could be appropriately trained. Of course, there's a lot going on with police forces being underfunded. Like even if you've got them, the First Nations police are not paid the same as other police. So there's a lot there. Like the two subjects kind of merged together.
So finally, Karyn, there's a lot going on as we've heard. What came out of the gathering? What was something substantial?
It was such a strange gathering, I've got to say, because we were all expecting, like looking at the agenda, you kind of go in as a reporter and you say, well, where are my stories going to be? And on the first day, they had the One Canadian Economy Act. But then the chiefs didn't discuss it. It was more like a presentation and panels. And so it ended up being this very quiet first day. And I was talking to chiefs as we were having coffee and we're joking, good thing there's coffee. Because it was also a very dark room. It was a very dark room. And, the lights were low. You're kind of sitting in your chair. And it was like very serene for a chiefs meeting. It felt very odd. And then the second day is when a lot of the stuff that we just talked about really started moving, talking about child welfare, talking about C5, having some of the chiefs on the floor speaking more and sort of debating more like you're used to. But I don't know, there were a few things that chiefs said on the floor that really indicated that they weren't too happy with the way this assembly went. One of them was a complaint from a number of chiefs that the resolutions hadn't gotten out in time. So, back in the days when we had, I guess, less professional governance on reserves, a resolution probably just had to go to the chief and they could like it or not like it. But now they really have to circulate it around with directors and, have a fulsome discussion with the communities of, what they should be thinking about with the resolutions and if they should support it and how it fits into what they're trying to accomplish. And so they were saying, some of the resolutions they got 3 days before the meeting. They were also saying that they would have liked to have been on the floor and debating and discussing them more. We left this morning, they were back on the agenda. They had passed some resolutions on child welfare. They had discussed the resolutions on C5, but there must have been about 50 resolutions sort of just left on the floor that, they may be, as we're talking, they're wrapping up. So they may be putting them into baskets and just trying to rush them through. But that was the kind of thing that chiefs were sort of upset about. So we'll see if there's like a bit of a learning experience from that, and if there's more debate, discussion, and a better way of handling things going forward.
Sounds good. Well, thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
You can read more from APTN News Ottawa correspondent Karyn Pugliese on aptnnews.ca. That's all for today's discussion. If you like what you heard, please leave a rating and review. Today's episode was produced by Mark Blackburn and hosted and edited by me, Jesse Andrushko. Charmaine Stryker is the executive producer of APTN News InFocus. Thanks for listening.
Hi, I'm Dennis Ward, one of the hosts of APTN National News. We've expanded our Truth and Politics panel into a weekly podcast. Each episode, panelists Jennifer Leywitz and Negon Sinclair join us to examine key issues affecting Indigenous peoples across Canada. Listen and subscribe on your favorite podcast player.